Today, I wanted to talk to you about something that is unfortunately very common in virtually all relationships of any kind, with virtually all narcissists of any kind, and that is projection. You are probably familiar with projection if you've been educating yourself about narcissistic personalities and the related relationship dynamics. Projection is when someone takes things that belong to them and assigns ownership or responsibility for them to other people, such as their own feelings or their own behaviors. A very simple example of this would be that someone is mad at their friend, so they perceive that their friend is mad at them. Or maybe they don't sincerely perceive this, but they claim that it's true, that they're not the one who's angry, so that they don't have to take responsibility for that emotion. Projection is ever present in relationships with narcissists. Narcissists cannot hold or process any negative emotional experiences, and they cannot tolerate any negative behaviors in themselves or beliefs about themselves, and they feel these things all the time. Negative internal experiences are near constant for pathologically narcissistic personalities. The majority of their energy is actually spent trying to ignore, mitigate, deny, or otherwise avoid these things. Because of this, they engage in routine, perhaps even constant, automatic projection of all their negative emotions, behaviors, traits, beliefs, and experiences. If they cannot project the things themselves onto other people, they will project blame and or responsibility for them. So to use our example, if they can't say that you are the one who's angry, they will say that you caused their anger. Now, projecting negative emotions, behaviors, and traits gets a lot of attention. So much so that many people might think that only negative emotions, traits, or behaviors are projected. This is not the case. As much as the narcissistic personality is projecting onto the other person or the people in this situation, those people are generally projecting just as much onto the narcissist. The difference is people are usually projecting positive or at the very least non-harmful things onto the narcissist, such as empathy, understanding, compassion, and more. Some of this projection is the result of the basic projection required for communication and connection. As we discussed in the episode of the show called Narcissists and the Eliza Effect, communication requires basic empathy. Empathy requires basic projection. We have to connect on at least a basic human level. Otherwise, it would be like talking to a space alien where you would have to ask them what every single word they said means. And in most situations with most people, this level of projection is a completely normal, safe practice that we engage in every single day, all the time, without even thinking about it because we don't need to think about it. It works the way it's supposed to, which means it happens without anybody being aware of it. It's just automatic. There are some times, though, that it doesn't work. There are some times that it's unsafe. These are the times when even these basic automatic projections are false, such as what commonly happens when we're dealing with pathologically narcissistic personalities. We initially project things like empathy and understanding onto them as a matter of course. It happens automatically. The problem comes when we can see clear evidence that our projections are missing the mark, as we eventually will, and it often doesn't even take that long. But then we continue to project things onto the narcissist that we have no real evidence for at all. We assume these things are there because we have them in us and because we need them to be there in the other person. The problem is they actually are not there. And beyond our natural basic projected assumption, there's often no real evidence that they ever were. For example, in romantic entanglements, people often say that narcissists seem like decent, quote-unquote, normal people in the beginning of the relationship. Yeah, but did they? Did they really? What we often find is that the answer to this question is actually no. And when people look back, they see that the reality has actually been there the entire time. It wasn't even really hidden that well. People were just looking for or at other things. Even when the reality is seen, it's often not seen for what it really is or for what it truly means. It may be explained or even dismissed using more normal types of frameworks, even though the behavior itself may actually not be what most people would consider normal or fall within any metric that is considered acceptable. People might say things like, oh, well, men don't listen, or women tend to be more emotional, or this person is just dramatic, or, well, but some people have trust issues. These things may or may not be true in general, but it doesn't even matter because the reality is that so often a narcissist's behavior falls so far outside of what most people would consider normal expressions of this framework that it really doesn't fit at all. Instead of normalizing behavior that is harmful and abnormal, instead of trying to find a framework to fit it into that makes it normal and therefore acceptable, we need to learn to accept it for what it is. As an aside, people sometimes have resistance to the word normal, and that's fine as far as that goes, right? However, there is a line where almost everyone can agree that something is too far beyond what is considered natural or healthy or acceptable. If someone ate their food by inhaling it through their ears, that would not be normal. In this same way, if, for example, someone has an emotional breakdown, a crisis, because you didn't seem happy enough when you said hello to them, this is also not normal. It's important to remember this is not a judgment of the other person's value or their worth. It's just an observation of the appropriateness of response to a given situation. We're not talking about feelings of disappointment or sadness if someone clearly does not seem excited to see you, for example. We are talking about someone spinning into emotional crisis over what most would consider to be a very minor, low-stakes interaction. People who routinely deal with pathologically narcissistic personalities know this type of situation all too well, unfortunately. This type of extreme reaction is an indication of a bigger, more serious problem, and to minimize or normalize it is dangerous. While it can be uncomfortable to feel like we're labeling or judging other people, we can't get so bogged down in trying to be fair and trying to be conscientious that we become irrational ourselves or lose the ability to address the reality of the situation. When we look at the narcissistic personality's behavior, at the things that they have said and done, at the way they act and react to various things, we realize that regardless of how well they may or may not be able to, quote, talk the talk, there is no actual reason to believe that things like empathy or even a basic understanding that other people exist and matter actually happens for them. Nothing we consistently see from this personality points to this. In fact, in so many situations, it actually points to the opposite. And when we are able to stop projecting and stop normalizing their behavior into these regular frameworks, we can generally see this pretty clearly. It's not even really hidden. Everything is about them. Every situation only matters insofar as to how it affects them, period. When we remove the filters of denial and projection, we can see this so clearly, people often wonder how they ever could have missed it. It's that blatant and that obvious so many times. Our innate function of projection blinds us to this long enough for an emotional investment to be created, an emotional attachment. Then denial and cognitive dissonance take over. Once this happens, the projection actually often becomes worse, not better. People see what they need to see, because to not see it is to have to face unpleasant things about the narcissist, the situation, the relationship, and themselves. This is why, for example, people are often so invested in the idea that the narcissist hates them and obsesses over destroying them. This idea still creates the illusion that they mattered to the narcissist in some way. Whether you think that's true or not doesn't matter. The narcissist does not even really see you. You don't matter to them at all. You are a mirror reflecting themselves back to them. And when you look into a mirror, you don't see the mirror. You see yourself. No matter how this shakes out, no matter what they say, no matter what they do, they are obsessing over their own reflection, not you. The relationship is an illusion. The narcissist is an illusion. Your idealized self and who you felt like you were in the relationship is an illusion. It is only the belief in these things that makes them seem real. It's like a placebo, right? When people are given a placebo, they're not really given any real medicine at all. The belief in the illusion makes it real. Maybe more precisely for this situation, it's like a starving dog eating a Whopper wrapper. The dog is so hungry and so entranced by the smell of food, the promise of food, the illusion of food, that he gobbles up the wrapper without realizing that what he's eating is not food. It's an attractive package that smells like food, but offers no actual sustenance at all. That is the relationship with a narcissist, the promise of something that never comes. It's a reflection of a shadow of a ghost. This is why you have to stop projecting onto the narcissist. Projection is the opposite of empathy. With empathy, we see how the other person feels. With projection, we see how we feel. Projection distorts reality. When you are dealing with someone who is so selfish and so toxic, this can be very harmful. If you are not seeing someone for who and how they actually are, you could very well be miscalculating the level of danger that you are in. It is extremely unsafe to assume someone has empathy, compassion, limits, morals that they don't actually have. Wanting to see the best in people, for example, is a wonderful thing, but there's a point where it's just flat out dangerous. Your safety is more important than the need to see yourself or others a certain way, much more important. I see the best in people cannot be a badge of honor or identity that's more important to you than your own safety. And wanting to believe in a comforting illusion cannot take precedence over actual safety and well-being. If it does, you are going to lose. And you will be lucky if all you lose is the relationship. Ultimately, there's a lot more at risk than hurt feelings. This doesn't mean that you have to become cynical and never trust anybody again, but it does mean that we have to stay grounded in reality and trust appropriately. Don't give people responsibility for things that belong to you, such as protecting yourself. So many people try to go through life never having boundaries and just hoping that they're not going to need them. The discomfort of enforcing boundaries is something that they're afraid of or they don't want to deal with it, so they place the responsibility for their safety and well-beings into the hands and judgment of other people. That's a mistake. It is nobody's responsibility to protect you from the evils of the world or other people, and nobody will. We are not children. Nobody is coming on their white horse to save us, and no grown-up is going to step in at the last minute to make everything okay. We have to do it ourselves, and we start by recognizing the need to protect ourselves in the first place. Having compassion, for example, is wonderful, but there's a difference between volunteering in a situation that's controlled where safety is prioritized versus walking into the lion's mouth unarmed all by yourself and just trusting it not to eat you. We have to be willing to see things as they are and respond to them appropriately. It's important to understand where limits apply here. If the situation requires you to be harmed or mistreated in any way, that needs to be the limit. People often cite compassion and pity as the biggest reason they have trouble exiting relationships with narcissists. And that's fine as far as it goes. But if you have pity for the bears at the zoo, for example, you probably don't try to bring them home into your house or venture into their enclosures. There's a limit to how far this pity and compassion can go. We need to recognize that these limits apply to human beings as well, perhaps more especially to human beings as well, and not project qualities onto people that they do not have. Not all humans have empathy. Not all humans have compassion. Not all humans will do the right thing. Not all humans have morals or a better nature that you can appeal to. Not all humans care about other people. This is a fact. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. These people exist, and there are a lot of them. If we refuse to understand that or refuse to believe it, we do so to our own detriment. Instead of assuming or even insisting that these qualities must be in there somewhere, we need to accept when we are consistently being shown that a person either does not have these qualities or is not willing to act on them. And we need to do this every time we are shown this reality because it's too dangerous to be wrong. This is not to say, oh no, we should never trust anybody, never take a risk. It means take appropriate risk, calculated risks. Wanting people to be or have something doesn't make it so. The best we can do is be as realistic as possible when dealing with other people, create and enforce boundaries with everyone, and learn to trust appropriately. It's hurtful and disappointing to realize that we're not going to get what we want from this person or this relationship or this situation, but it's much less hurtful and disappointing than if we keep trying to get it where there's no real chance of it ever happening at all, but we just refuse to accept that. How do we know when this is the case? By looking, by listening. Stop guessing. Stop assuming. Stop interpreting. Stop denying. Stop projecting. Really see and really hear what's going on. Really look and really listen. In order to see, one has only to look. In order to hear, one has only to listen. If we can stop buying into the ridiculous cartoon gimmick of these personalities, if we can push our own feelings and projections to the side and just look, really look, we will likely find that the truth has been right there in front of us the entire time. We just didn't see it.